So what angle should I sharpen my knife at? We're talking about the edge angle here, and that is the angle that you hold your knife at against the whetstone when you're sharpening it. A smaller edge angle means a sharper knife, but also a slightly more fragile edge. A larger edge angle means a more durable knife, but not quite such a sharp edge. Western knives you would sharpen at 20 degrees on the left and 20 degrees on the right, typically. Meat cleavers, more like 25 degrees. You're actually cleaving, which is different from cutting. So with a cleaver, you're splitting food apart and you need a larger edge angle for that. And then Japanese knives are typically a smaller angle. So 15 degrees either side for a double bevel Japanese knife. So Japanese knives typically use harder steels, which allows you to sharpen them at a smaller angle, and 15 degrees either side is typical, producing a sharper knife. So with sharpening knives, the edge angle that you set is one of the most important things, and keeping that consistent through the sharpening process is vital. So that's one of the first things I learnt when I learnt to sharpen knives. And then I discovered angle guides. So that sounded like a great idea. I bought an angle guide that you clipped onto the knife. I've bought an angle guide that tells you what angle you're holding your blade at, but I didn't get on with them very well at all. So I've ended up, as a product designer, designing an angle guide for TOG, which works in a different way. When you sharpen a kitchen knife, the bit you're sharpening is called the secondary bevel. It's about 1 millimeter in size, and you can see it easily with the naked eye. The primary bevel is the larger part of the blade that is tapered down to the cutting edge and that is ground in production. A double bevel knife is one that is symmetrical and has a primary and secondary bevel on both sides. Traditional Japanese knives like the Usuba, Yanagiba and Deba are made differently to this. By having primary bevels only on one side, the total angle is halved, which means the blade is sharper. When you come to sharpen single bevel knives like these, you put the flat side down completely flat on the whetstone. The knives are ground a little hollow, so you're only actually sharpening the cutting edge and the spine. Single bevel knives aren't that common in the West and are specific to left or right-handed people. And to get technical, there is actually something in between a single bevel and a double bevel knife called a 70-30 edge. This is where the primary bevels are symmetrical, but the knife is sharpened differently on each side. This makes the knife cut food better and straighter than a totally symmetrical knife with a 50-50 edge. If you're right-handed, you sharpen the right side of the knife about twice as much as the left, meaning the secondary bevel is visibly larger on the side of the dominant hand. Technically, in Japan, the angles are ground differently on either side too. For example, a TOG is actually ground at around 20 degrees on the right and 10 degrees on the left, slightly favouring right-handed people. The total angle is still 30 degrees, the same as if it was ground at 15 degrees each side. Unless you're a professional knife sharpener or very experienced, I wouldn't worry about 70-30 edges too much. Just sharpen 15 degrees each side for Japanese knives, or 20 each side for Western ones. If you wish, you can sharpen a bit more on the side of your dominant hand, but keep the two angles the same. Okay, so now you know what angle you're going to use when you're sharpening. It's important to set that angle correctly and to maintain it throughout the sharpening process. So we've got another video which explains that in more detail.